Hello, I'm Carolyn Herbert from the Finance News Network, and joining me from Folkestone Education Trust to discuss the company's first half 2016 results is CEO Nick Anagnostou. Nick, welcome to FNN.
Thank you.
Nick, before we get into your results, can you start by giving us a brief overview of the trust?
FET is an ASX 300 listed property trust. It focuses on childcare with about 400 childcare centres around Australia and New Zealand. It's got a market capitalisation of about $550 million and on gross assets of about $710 million. Folkestone Limited is the manager, and Folkestone has certainly a focus on social infrastructure from an aged care viewpoint all the way back to childcare. FET clearly sees the correlation between population growth, the necessity for parents to be able to have dual incomes to pay for the cost of living today, and certainly the educational social benefits of childcare, particularly in the important part of that 0 to 5 age group.
And can you explain what it is about the trust that has driven such good returns to investors, and will this continue? Look,
I think it will. There's certainly a number of key points here that differentiate FET from other property trusts, and that's really driven by the structure, and that is triple net leases importantly mean there's no leakage of CapEx. I think our CapEx budget last 6 months was $50,000. We're incentive free, which a lot of investors are certainly starting to recognise now as being a very important part of their returns, and the fact that we're not having to borrow. Certainly the viewpoint that there's a versatility in the land that the centres sit on, where if they're not going to be a centre in 10 or 15 years' time, there's certainly redevelopment potential, and there's predictability here. They recognise that in fact that there is latent demand. We've got 500,000 more children coming in this age group, in the next 15 years.
And Nick, now to your results for the half year ended 31 December 2015. What were the highlights?
Well, we had a 10% increase in our NTA, and that's been compounding now, I think about 11% per annum over the last 4 or 5 years. And that's really driven by the market actually recognising childcare assets for what they are, and a better asset than, say, retail or industrial, or strata office in that under $5 million category. We've had a 13% increase in our profit, our statutory profit over the term, together with a 5.5% increase in our distributions.
And Nick, now to the portfolio. How many centres does the portfolio comprise, and what's the geographic spread?
We've got 396 centres across Australia and New Zealand, and they spread from Darwin to Perth to Tasmania back up to Brisbane. Including in that, we've also got about $100 million worth of development centres that are underway, and there's 18 of those. So geographically, we're as diverse as you can be. And
what about the tenant profile?
We've got 28 different tenants, and that's important to us because part of good childcare is obviously good operators, so we're out there seeking the best ones, and I don't think there's no one in the marketplace that can match us for tenant diversity.
So what's the WALE occupancy rate, and what does the portfolio yield?
The yield's about 7.6%, that's real estate on income. In terms of WALE, we've got 7.8 years as at 31 December, and that's driven by the fact that FET has a 5-year clause in its leases that asks tenants to take up their options 5 years early, not the 3 or 6 months that traditional real estate has.
So how many properties do you have in development at the moment, and how long does it typically take to develop a new centre?
18 properties under development at the moment, and look, they can vary depending upon where they are, but they're generally somewhere between 11 and 18 months in order to get one off the ground.
And Nick, can you comment on the early learning centre property market? What's the outlook, and what sort of trends are you seeing at the moment?
I mentioned before, the trend is that the sector's been priced, and that's because small investors are out there now making the comparison and saying, I can have a 15-year triple net lease in childcare with versatility in my site, or I can go and buy a small retail or strata office, which typically has a 3 or 5 year lease structure, and then influenced by incentives. So they look at this as being a little bit of low management, but it allows them to redevelop in the future if in fact childcare doesn't work. About 60% of our value sits in land, and I think that's a key driver for a lot of the people who buy our centres.
And finally, Nick, what's your guidance for the second half of FY 2016?
We expect to do another 6.7 cents, so that'll take us to 13.4, which is what we forecast at the start of the year.
Nick Anagnostou, thanks for the update.
You're welcome.